Hi, Andy Farquharson here on the end of day 3 of the Oxford Symposium on Employee Ownership, and we're here at Blenheim Palace. The beautiful Blenheim Palace, a little bit under construction, but otherwise absolutely amazing, which also echoes how great the past few days have been. There's just such amazing generosity and openness and sharing from this community, talking about all the potential sort of challenges and opportunities in bringing employee ownership to more people and having a much greater impact. Something that really stuck out for me was, I guess, the desire to get more employee voice, not only into how we're creating the policy, but also just thinking more about having that empathetic view of what it could mean for the employee owners and also what it could mean for their mental health and well-being. That was a key takeaway from me, but I'm going to let you hear from a few more of the attendees. And so, speak to you soon. Which is, what's your name and what's your organisation?
My name is Chantal Carr, and my organization is Hope Rising, and I'm also the CEO of Disruptive Giving.
Thank you. And what has been your key takeaway from the conference?
The importance of the humanity, the leadership part that's part of employee ownership, and it's so critical to even our work. We teach women business that moves into co-ops, and I would love to see some of those evolve into some employee ownership as an option. And so really the mindset changed from being the employee to being the owner and seeing that dignity, and that it's a big shift.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's one of my key takeaways, is that management level that has to be able to juggle the human part.
Knowing that you're a little bit new to the sort of the employee ownership space, I mean, what's an innovation that you've heard about over the last 3 days in EO, which is exciting for you?
Innovation in the EO space. I have to think about that for a minute.
Maybe is it a model that you've heard, or just something happening in a particular country?
You know, I think really listening to how these countries are trying to get it moving, and specifically how hard it is to get the policy piece in the governments. And my key takeaway actually came from John this evening when he said, no, start with the success case.
Yeah.
Go find one business that believes in the model and go do it. And that's what we found in our work in Africa with the women. Just go do it, and then you have the data, and then you can have the policy conversation, and that feels a lot more feasible than the
tangible.
Whole big,
yeah.
Get the money and get a policy and talk to governments. Like that part, I feel is a viable path forward.
Very good.
That I like.
Thinking into the future, 12 months. If you're going to pick up a newspaper, be excited to see a headline about employee ownership, what would it say?
Mine would say that a women's co-op in Kenya was able to transition into employee ownership, and this is what it looked like. I would just be thrilled. I really feel like it's going to come from the bottom up. The women entrepreneurs throughout Africa are they're where the heart is, it's where the action is happening, and I feel like that's where I want to see employee ownership go in a lot of these countries where formal employment is really difficult.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Can you just state your name and where you work?
Robert Postlethwaite, Director of Postlethwaite Employee Ownership and Share Schemes Specialist Lawyers.
Fantastic. And what would you say is your biggest takeaway from these last 3 days?
Well, there's quite a few takeaways, but what's been really interesting this morning is to hear people talk about governance in employee-owned companies, and some of being really honest about some of the real challenges that they face. So, for example, Beatriz Gonzalez from a manufacturing company in the Basque region has been talking very honestly about the challenges she faces in a company where each employee has one vote, and the particular issue she's facing is that employees tend to favour their short-term benefit rather than a willingness to think about the long term.
What is your name and where do you work?
So I'm Glen Dott. I'm a specialist advisor on employee ownership, and I work within a specialist unit in Scottish Enterprise. In effect, Cooperative Development Scotland, we promote cooperatives that are specialised in employee ownership. That's in Scotland, so in the Central Belt. But we are pan-Scotland,
okay.
So we cover the whole of Scotland. But the vast majority of businesses are in the Central Belt.
And what has been your key takeaway from the last few days?
So there are innovative ways of financing businesses, and I am interested in following up on the ESOP model from the States and how they leverage finance. And what they have indicated is that there's been 21% growth, if I understood the correct, in turnover of employee-owned businesses. And it's merger and acquisition activity, and there is very limited merger and acquisition activity in Scotland, and I would like to investigate this further. So to me, that's interesting and important, and a way for growing the sector.
Okay, that may have taken the wind out of the next question, is what do you think is the biggest innovation in employee ownership?
So I think in the UK we have to look more carefully at how we get to the next level. I think there are certain elements of the American model, and one of the things I like about it is that an ESOP is based around a pension, and therefore a 1K, which is essentially their pension funds, and investing that money. And I think that ties people more closely into the success of the business. So I think in the UK we should be looking at M&A activity and how we might be able to leverage the advantages of the ESOP model in the States. Innovation, and there's been a lot of talk about AI, and possibly we could use more of that, and how do we do that? And I think we need to be looking at that further.
Okay, now if we think about into the future, 12 months' time, there's going to be a headline written about employee ownership. What does it say?
The sector has grown massively. The hockey stick, the end of the hockey stick, and there's much more merger and acquisition activity, and employee-owned businesses have set up some kind of a fund to promote, develop by business.
Thanks for joining us on this series from the Oxford Symposium on employee ownership. It's been such an amazing learning experience for me, and such an awesome sharing experience for all the people here. Hope you've enjoyed these conversations, and I'm hoping to be able to provide you a lot more in-depth interviews with some of the leaders that have been here with the conference, talking about employee ownership in different parts of the world, but also, more importantly, feeling what it's like for both the employees and for the owners. Because a key part of this podcast is helping to educate the owners on what it means for them to be able to sell their business, keep their legacy alive. So more of that coming, and thank you very much for joining. Cheers. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to continue learning about employee ownership as an alternative exit, head across to abettermonday.me for additional links and resources. You can also make sure to subscribe or follow along in your favorite podcast app, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review.